going back. Not gonna buy into all that. Hey, hey, ain't gonna hide. Gonna let all the fears slide. Got mother nature is on my side. Got all of the loving growing inside.
Hello, everyone. Welcome once again to the New Now. I'm here with a first-time guest, Gregory Wrightstone. Convenient Warming is the book he has released not too long ago. So we're going to discuss that, some background, for his authorship of said book and, how he got into the topic. Hey, Greg, how's it going?
Oh, really good. Yeah, the book was just released last week.
Oh,
It just
really?
was put up available on Amazon for the first. They've been promoting pre-publication sales. It just came
Ah,
up Friday, so this is all hot and new.
wow. I guess very lucky for us. I know we were going to talk a couple of weeks ago originally, and we had some delays. So perfect timing, perfect timing. So, Greg, maybe you could take us into a bit of the background as to, well, why you wrote such a book.
Well, this is my second book. My first book was Inconvenient Facts,
Okay.
dealing with the same subject of climate change. And it was highly successful. Sold nearly 100,000 copies of the book. It was number one bestseller in a number of categories off and on for the last 6 years. Uh, some notable people have adopted me as and really just pushed that book. Uh, Among them might be Candace Owens, if you've heard that name.
Of course.
She just found the book, loved it, said it's changed everything that I believe about climate change. And so I was driven to write that book. I'm a geologist,
Okay.
got a master's in geology. I've been accepted as an expert reviewer for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. I was driven to write that first book because I knew some of what we're being told about climate change was just wrong. Others I suspected as being wrong. For example, what clearly was wrong was this claim of ocean acidification, that the oceans, because of rising levels of carbon dioxide or CO2, are becoming acidified. And I just knew as a geologist that I knew, knowing history and science, I knew that CO2 levels have been 10 and 15 times as high in the past, and the ocean's never acidified. And so I took a deep dive. I said, I'm going to find out what's going on. I'm not going to trust anybody. I'm going to go back. I'm going to look at the base data. I'm going to see what the data tell me. And what I found, frankly, angered me
Hmm.
was I found that a lot of what we were being told by what were formerly respected scientists, at least respected in my eyes, were frankly lies,
Hmm.
and they were misleading people about the science, and that drove me to write Inconvenient Facts. And the second book here, I've moved beyond the first book. And over the last several years, we've been talking. There is no climate crisis. If I had been on with you before, we would have talked about that. And clearly, there is no climate crisis.
Hmm.
But I've moved beyond that to see that actually, by almost every metric you look at, Earth's ecosystems are thriving and prospering, and humanity is benefiting from the combination of modest warming and more CO2. I call it the greatest untold story of the 21st century, that of a thriving world, a thriving planet, an improving human condition. And again, the word you're going to hear me say a lot is celebrate. And we need to celebrate that. And so this book captures that. It's in three sections. I go through some of the science, the first section of the book with temperature and carbon dioxide, and to prove that the temperatures that we have today, while we're in a warming trend, um, and the warming trend started more than 300 years ago. Um, the temperatures we see today are not unusual nor unprecedented as being claimed. They're quite fairly similar to that we've seen in previous warming periods over the last several thousand years. Um, and so we go through and we look at that. We see that CO2 levels today aren't dangerously high. They're actually dangerously low
Hmm.
because it's inhibiting plant growth. Plants don't reach their full optimum growth potential at the low carbon dioxide levels we have today. Um, and it's something that we should again celebrate the increase of CO2 over the last well, several hundred years. And so the second section of the book deals with a subject that's fascinating to me. It deals with the relationship between human history and temperature history.
Oh, really?
It's huge, fascinating. We look back to the first great civilizations and empires
Right.
during what was called the Minoan warm period or the Bronze Age. And we look at each one of the warming and cooling periods. We'll talk more about that as we go through here today, but we find that history tells us that warmer is good. Warm has always been hugely beneficial. Um, and the cold periods were horrific. Each one of these cold periods was associated with uh, crop failure, famine, pestilence, and mass depopulation. And
Hmm.
so we look at that human history, climate history, and then the third section is, I believe it's called Life is Good and Getting Better. And we look at the things that we see that find that we're not seeing deforestation, we're seeing reforestation. We're seeing the deserts aren't expanding, they're shrinking. We see that
Really?
forest fires aren't increasing, they're decreasing. And we look at that and I use scientific,
Hmm.
this is all sourced and referenced with peer-reviewed data from NASA, Canadian Fire Service, other points of reference of documented sources. Uh, and it's the material that those pushing the climate crisis don't want you to know. So I put that all together, uh, and I just got contacted today, a gentleman that I respect greatly. He actually owned a huge restaurant chain. I'm not going to tell you the name because you would know it, and sold
Okay.
out a few years ago. But he's a tremendous writer himself. And he said, Greg, I picked that book up in the morning and I couldn't put it down. He said, I spent the entire day reading your book. I read through it in one sitting. He said, I could not put it down. It was just so interesting because it leads from one to another to another. It's, and I was like, man, I was pumped after he told me that. And so right now, the book, like I say, it's just been released. And the title is A Very Convenient Warming, uh, just now available on Amazon. Uh, it just went up.
We'll leave the
They
links
got,
below.
and I've got a website. You can buy it directly from my website if you don't want to send Jeff Bezos his blood money. The website is convenientwarming.com,
Okay.
and you can buy it directly from my website there. A lot of people, it's easy to buy off of Amazon. I get that. Um, but convenientwarming.com is the website I'm selling the book, and it's it was a labor of love. I was so proud. I had people I've gotten such great response. So I'm hoping that we see. I'm pretty confident that the book is just going to take off. We've got a bet with several people on what date will reach number one bestseller,
Oh.
but it should be in the next 2 weeks. I'm predicting.
Well, why do you think people are pushing the other side? I mean, obviously, even like as someone who's in the news myself, and I see what does get pushed, and I know what you're saying is true from my guts and my heart and my own experiences. But even some of what you've just shared is a little not shocking, but part of me is going, isn't that interesting that you hear this story, and then the exact opposite is what's
Yeah, that's it. I get basically you're asking, if I can be so bold, you're asking why are they lying to us?
yeah,
Is really what it comes down to,
yes,
isn't it?
yeah,
And I get asked that a lot, and I'll tell you the same thing that I tell others. I can't look inside men's and women's souls to see what their motivations are.
hmm,
But I'm a scientist, and as a scientist, I can take a look and say, okay, this is what they're telling you, and here's what the facts are that dispute that.
hmm,
That's my role as a scientist, and you and everyone watching this is just as qualified as I am to tell me why they're doing it. I hear all kinds of things. If I ask you, why are they lying to us? You'd probably say, control our lives. Uh, it's funding for the scientists. There's a lot of money to be made in this. There's all sorts of things we can come up with as to why they're doing it. Some have said it's a destruction of the Western economies and capitalism. I it's when you talk about things like this, it sounds like this great conspiracy theory, but there has to be something going on driving this, and I don't know what it is. And maybe all of those people are kind of right and lump
Hmm.
them all into one. But again, as a scientist, I get angry when I hear this. It's just blatantly misrepresenting the data. We can see that, and I capture some of that in the book of the misrepresentation of the data. Well, I'll give you one example. Um, the UN published a report last year on natural disasters, and the report claimed, and they went back to 1980, and uh, the the report, the chart that they showed, the report claimed that there's been a five-fold increase in natural disasters since 1980. Well, I looked at their data. The alarm, I've got pretty sensitive internal BS detector, and it started going off. I said, wait a minute, something's wrong here. And we looked into that data, and I looked at a colleague of mine, Kip Hansen. He and I worked together. He actually emailed the person, Regina Below, who was in charge of the data collected in that. And we looked at it, and she admitted that, well, that period from 1980 to the year 2000 was a period when we were just building out our stations. We were adding stations every year that were cataloging natural disasters. And she admitted to us, we've got it in an email, that she admitted that, well, that first 20 years was, you shouldn't use that because it was an increase in reporting of
Ah.
disasters, not an increase in actual disasters. She
Mm.
said, if you look at only the data after they built out their stations from 2000 on, we've seen a 10% decline.
Hmm.
So the data says there's a 10% decline. They said that there was a five-fold increase. And that's how they what they do is they start with a conclusion and then fit the facts to it. They torture the data statistically until they get the conclusion they want. Another example of that I capture in my book is that of extinctions.
Mm.
And again, um, the UN, it was called the IPBES, International, I don't know what the initials stand for, but it was a report issued by the UN that claimed that there would be 1 million species going extinct over the next several decades.
I remember that. Yeah, yeah.
And they included a chart. And again, my internal alarm started going off when I looked at this, and it was plastered everywhere. The extinctions were exploding, a million species to go extinct. And so we looked at the data, and their chart only captured one data point per century. Okay. It started in the year 1500, 60. So they only have five data points to show the skyrocketing extinctions. I said, wait a minute. So I went back and I actually got the data source. It's called the IUCUN Red List. It's the red. That's where you go. If you want to find out about endangered species or extinctions, you go to the Red List. And that's what I did. And they reported their data on every 10 years. They have a decadal. I went back and I looked at it and looked. I said, let's take a look at that. It
Right.
turns out that extinctions actually peaked in the late 1800s and 1900s, and they've been in significant decline ever since.
Hmm.
But their chart showed cumulative by
Mm.
century. And man, they tortured the data using statistical methodology to make it look terrible. To get a million species to go extinct over the next several decades, you'd need to have 25,000 to 30,000 species go extinct per year. You know what's been average for the last 40 years, the extinction rate per year? Two. Two per year. Two. Not 20,000, not 30,000. And so the story should have been, if they looked at the data honestly, they should have concluded that we're doing a really, really good job protecting our endangered species, and we should continue doing that. But
Hmm.
instead, no, they had to paint this doom and gloom alarm of this fake extinction crisis. And it's stuff like, as a scientist, I get so angry. I looked at that and I just, and and that's part of my job is to expose the lies out there that are like that. We're seeing it with the temperature data has been manipulated.
Mm.
I'm finishing up right now a report on the United States, the American state of Wyoming.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be traveling there in a few weeks. And we're seeing in Wyoming, we're doing these state and regional studies, and we see the same thing repeated time and time again. We see that the hottest temperatures peaked 90 years ago, back in the 1920s and 30s. In the United States, it was the Dust Bowl.
Mm.
And it was the hottest, and Canada. Canada was like that too. 20s and 30s, the Dust Bowl era. We're really, really, so we see the hottest temperatures there. But if you look at this is NOAA, National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration data. And we took a look at their data and found that they've adjusted the temperatures. And the modern recent temperatures were adjusted upward. The older temperatures were adjusted downward. All of that exaggerated the warming effect that we've had. It's been warming, but this adjustment made it look more severe. And we see that everywhere we're going and looking. So we went back and I looked at the raw data that showed, and even the adjusted data for Wyoming, a lot of the other states, you see nothing alarming. For example, in this case, we saw 1.2 degrees Fahrenheit increase of temperature. But the story here was it wasn't from hot temperatures. Imagine they average temperature all through the day. So they're averaging in noon temperatures and midnight temperatures.
Mm.
And what we saw was there was actually a decline in the hottest temperatures and a pretty significant increase upward of the coldest nighttime temperatures. To get that warming that we've seen. And that's a good thing. If warming temperatures at night, and it's getting warmer, if your coldest nighttime temperatures are increasing, that's really beneficial, particularly for agriculture.
It's true.
Longer growing seasons. For example, in the United States, again, in my book, I capture this, that we've seen an extension of the growing season since 1900. Growing season has been extended by a little over 2 weeks. Think about that. That's huge for agriculture. You get more plantings in. Killing frosts end earlier in the spring and arrive later in the fall. If you've got a fruit orchard in Canada or the United States, what do you fear most? You fear late spring killing frost. It'll destroy your orchard produce for that year. Because of this, these happen less frequently or not at all. Again, this is huge benefit. And what we're seeing is what that's translating to is this warmth combined with more CO2. CO2 has a fertilization effect. Increasing CO2 means plants grow bigger, stronger, more fruits, more flowers. And we're seeing crops. One of the sections in my book there is on agricultural productivity. We see crops breaking records year after year after year in country after country. We look at the top 8 in the book. I look at and again, this is a very convenient warming is the name of the book. And we see that I looked at the top 8 crops in the world in terms of tonnage produced. Find that each one of those it's really amazing to see the productivity increasing year after year. So again, it's based on 3 things: increasing temperature, which is good; increasing CO2, which is really good; and a continued and increased use of nitrogen-based fertilizer. And this nitrogen-based fertilizer, mind you, is derived from evil fossil fuels. And it's mainly natural gas derived as nitrogen-based fertilizer. It's in the Haber-Bosch process where it was developed in the early 20th century. Interesting that it wasn't really adopted until the middle of the 20th century because a lot of their product was being used for explosives in World War II. So the war machine in World War II was sucking up the product of the nitrogen. And it was after World War II when they started using nitrogen-based fertilizer. So it's again, I call it the greatest untold story of the 21st century. This is a thriving Earth. We also capture I compare crop productivity to world population. And we find that Actually, food production is outpacing population growth significantly,
Isn't that interesting?
contrary to what others like Al Gore or John Kerry or Greta Thunberg will tell you. They'll tell you there's too many people living on Earth. We can't sustain them. Yes, we can, and we are. And again, it's because of global warming, CO2, and fossil fuel derived nitrogen fertilizer. So there, Greta.
Interesting, interesting. I mean, even in this short conversation, you've taken me right around like I know better, but I keep getting all the images of the opposite that you've mentioned. And, I just want to say this is beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. And I totally appreciate your work you've done. And you've even made my day. But isn't that wonderful that you talk to somebody who's intelligent, loving, and actually looking at the facts, and then the feeling for your life grows. You feel more confident, optimistic, you want to get out. You hear all the time about the food, going down, the food sources are down. There's a problem. And then, exactly. Then, and I see the loving look in your face, to be honest. And not that, like Greta always looks like she's, swallowed a lemon or she sat on one anyways.
Oh, that is true. Well, again, the third section of the book, I quote Frank Sinatra. The best is yet to come. And it is. And what I see is nothing but hope and bounty for the future. Just not doom and gloom. No, and again, we should celebrate this.
Well, I'm curious, like as a scientist, you mentioned earlier in our chat that, CO2 is not as high as it could be, for more beneficial growth. I mean, do you have any studies on why that is the way it is right now?
Oh, sure. The crops and that we're consuming and the plants evolved at much higher CO2 levels. Most of them evolved at over 2,000 parts per million, 5 times what it is today. So these evolved needing high CO2 levels. Later on, those are called the C3 plants. The C4 plants evolved later at lower CO2 levels, and they could take better advantage of lower CO2 levels. Although they do better with high, they were able to take a better advantage of these low CO2 levels. And so if we see, for example, there's a reason that growers using greenhouses pump CO2 into their greenhouses.
Hmm.
They know it's many, more than dozens of studies, probably hundreds of studies, are document the huge growth potential from an increased CO2. And CO2 in greenhouses, the studies I've seen that they look at the economics of carbon dioxide in greenhouses, and they say the optimum level is maybe 800 to 1,200 parts per million. Again, we're about 400, so that's twice and 3 times our levels today. They would continue to be better growth at higher CO2 levels, but for a greenhouse, you have to look at the economics. That there's only so much. There's a point of where the benefits don't equal the investment, and that seems to be 1,200 parts per million. Although up to 2,000 parts per million, the plants would still be growing better, but just wouldn't be a good economic investment for your, if you're growing marijuana in a greenhouse. We see that there are actually a lot of these marijuana places they've built some of these greenhouses next to breweries, and they're taking the CO2 from the brewery
Really?
and pumping that right into the greenhouse.
Isn't that
It's
interesting?
innovative and it's cost effective, and
Isn't that
it's pretty interesting.
isn't that
Not that I'm a
interesting?
proponent of marijuana being, well, whatever. We'll leave that go for now. But
Well,
uh, it's it's a fascinating science. And again, I'm executive director of the CO2 Coalition. Uh, we're the preeminent scientific organization in the world
oh,
that deals with climate realism. We have more than 150 of the top scientists.
would you know why it's
And
less now than it was, or like what did the science like? You said the plants
why
were.
is it low today?
Yeah, why is it low? Like, I mean, they're telling us it's too high, obviously, and the opposite is it's actually too low. So
Yes.
what would you say? What would your scientific
Oh, well, I deal with that in my book. We had very, very low levels similar today back during what was called the Carboniferous period, the Mississippi and Pennsylvania. And before that, that was 200 million years ago. I don't have the numbers right in front of me. At the end of the Devonian period, we had the rise of grasses and trees. They evolved, and it was because the plants and the grasses developed a thing called lignin
Mm.
that allowed plants to grow tall.
Hmm.
Because this lignin, if you can imagine, it's like rebar in concrete that allows us to build, skyscrapers.
Right.
And it's this lignin that allows the trees to grow to great height. Um, and which was all well and good, but there was nothing to decompose the lignin. And so during what was called the Carboniferous period, most of the world's coal reserves accumulated at that time. And that's because these vast swamps, trees lived, died, fell over, but didn't decompose. And they just one on top of the other, hundreds of feet of swamps that were later buried, deeply converted to coal. And so they were just year after year, thousands of years and eons after eon of these dead trees accumulating. In the United States, according to the USGS, some 83% of the coal reserves in North America accumulated during that time. So we had this stuff called lignin that didn't decompose.
Mm.
And then at the end of this period, voila, we had the evolution of a thing called lignase. It was a bacteria that
Mm.
fed on the lignin, and man, it just gobbled up the probably hundreds of feet of trees that decomposed rapidly. So that these trees, as they live and die, they're sucking up carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, and it's a natural carbon capture and sequestration. So
Mm.
these trees would live and die. Each tree that fell down and turned into coal was captured and took all that carbon dioxide, which is now carbon, and become a coal mine, coal seam. And think about it, if you will, this coal that they're telling you about, they're really proud of solar energy. We need to go to solar energy, right? Well, think about it. Those trees, I call them solar powered batteries, the coal that we're burning right now, because it was sunlight and photosynthesis and carbon dioxide that fueled the tree growth.
Of
And the
course.
tree captured it, fell, died, it got sequestered. And what we're doing is liberating this giant solar powered battery we call coal. And we're putting that into the atmosphere, thank God.
Ah,
We're able to
interesting.
grow more crops. If you think about it that way, and the same with oil and gas are organic accumulations of organic matter. It's mostly uh, algal mats and blooms that bloom and die, fall to the bottom, bloom and die, fall in the bottom. This occurs over thousands and thousands and thousands of years. It accumulates in organic rich shales, and then that's buried deeply, heated. The deeper it's buried, the hotter it gets. It gets heated, converted first to oil, then to wet gas, finally at higher temperatures converted to natural gas
Hmm.
and methane. So don't buy this idea of abiogenic oil that's been spread.
No, no, no.
It's completely false, completely false. There's some bad science out there that's being passed. So this is it's got a bad name when they call it fossil fuels. It's really poorly named because it's not really people say, oh, they're dinosaurs that died and all this. No, it's not. It was a little phytoplankton that were in the oceans. And again, the sunlight powered them. And they bloom and they die and they fall to the bottom. Again, that's another oil and gas are really another solar generated solar battery that we're liberating. So we're liberating trapped carbon dioxide. We call it the miracle molecule.
Isn't that interesting? It's like we're doing a natural, like if wood burns, you would say the great creator if you want to, if you believe in, you don't have to believe in God or spirit or whatever, but the fact that it burns and keeps you warm and it's a natural activity for when you're cold is actually, part of the natural process because it's a good thing, as you
Yep,
say.
it is.
Wow. And all of the people that are trying to stop that for those various nefarious reasons we touched base upon a little bit earlier, and that could be a conversation for another, deep dive. why they're getting in the way of that. That's fascinating. Fascinating.
Yeah, we should. It's it's a great story, and it needs to get out there. And the question is, we're silenced tremendously. We're the major media won't have us on because they say the science is settled. There is no debate.
Mhm.
Anything that goes contrary to this climate crisis is just science denialism, and it's not. We have, again, at the CO2 Coalition, we have more than 150 of the top scientists in the world. We just John Clauser just joined our board. You may not know that name, but he's the current Nobel laureate in physics.
Mm.
And when he was honored this spring at the White House by Joe Biden for receiving the Nobel Prize in Physics. Afterwards, he shook Joe's hand. He told Joe Biden, he says, the science that you're relying on for energy and climate policy is just wrong. And Joe Biden got angry, as he's wont to do. And he says, you're just spouting right-wing science. So Joe Biden's lecturing the current Nobel laureate in physics on science. And John later went to Korea to the quantum physics conference there. And in his lecture, he stated quite forcefully that there is no climate crisis, and there isn't. But again, we've gone beyond that from there is no climate crisis to man, life is good and getting better.
What was that fellow's name again? The Nobel laureate you just mentioned?
John Clauser,
John Clauser.
Clauser.
Clauser. That's just amazing, to see that the opposite of everything is true and that, the world is good and getting better. And, I'm a gardener myself, so everyone kind of knows. I mean, at least the natural world could be getting better. The human world has other options and challenges that seem to be pushing down on this. And it's fast. Like, have you had like a lot of challenges in getting the book out? Like when you try and get on shows or, when you try and share articles and
Well,
stuff like
I
that?
won't get on any mainstream shows. In the United States, there are quite a few podcasts and stations like yours. And this is my sixth interview for the day, by the way.
Hmm.
So we're getting the word out there in dribbles and drabs. My book itself I self-published by choice.
Hmm.
I had talked to some other publishers that were interested, but no one could provide the money that it just works better for me because I have complete control of the process
Hmm.
of what's in the book, what's captured. A lot of the publishers that I talked to, they wanted a black and white book. Well, if you've seen the book, it's got some 75 full color illustrations. The book just wouldn't be the same
Hmm.
if it wasn't. It's on high quality paper. I insist on, um, and it's a just a wonderful, uh, very convenient warming. It's a high quality paper, high quality cover, and it's yeah. So, but I've been personally stifled, or got a smartphone app that's been taken down from Apple. Uh, my LinkedIn account, I was permanently banned from LinkedIn uh, almost a year and a half ago. Well, you'll find this is funny. You don't know whether to laugh or cry. So when I was posted science on LinkedIn, I posted with what the source was, and it was all science. And they started removing my posts.
Hmm.
Just almost everything I put up, bam, it was removed immediately. They called it false and misleading. My very last post, I said, I think I'm about to be banned and deplatformed by LinkedIn. They removed it, called it false and misleading, and then banned and deplatformed me. So they banned and deplat. You understand what I'm saying? It
Yeah.
was like you don't know whether I just have to laugh at things like that. That's the desperation they're going to because I make sense. I provide science and understandable method. It provides all sourced and referenced, and it's all very factual. And people hear this and they go, their eyes get wide. I didn't know that, but I'm hugely optimistic from what I see as I travel and talk to people. I find that people are are thirsty for this information. They're thirsty to find out the facts that they've never heard before.
Yep.
And let's talk about here's something fascinating.
Okay.
Sea level rise. We're being told that island nations around the world are in danger of being put underwater. The UN, according to the UN, the most at-risk island is the island nation of the Maldives, a series of dozens of islands. Highest point's only 14 feet above sea level. And okay, that sounds, if sea level is going to rise, it wouldn't take much to put them underwater. Okay, well, as a geologist, I look at it and I say, okay, 15,000 years ago, the Maldives were also just above sea level. And in the last 15,000 years, sea level has risen 400 feet. Why aren't they under 400 feet of water? Think about that. I'll tell you why. You knew I was going to. It's a geologic process, a geologic process known as accretion. And as sea level rises, these islands grow because when storms come, they wash the gravels and sands from the near shore up onto the island. It doesn't sound like much. It's a slow process, but geology is a slow process. And these islands have grown as sea level rises. And then when sea level will begin to fall again, which it will, erosion takes over. So it's a self-leveling. They're growing as sea level rises. As sea level falls, erosion takes over and keeps them low. So it's fascinating, but also think about this. If you Google Forbes and Maldives, they had a report not that long ago concerning the construction boom in the Maldives. There were 14 resort complexes being constructed on the Maldives and 3 airports. All these resort complexes were being funded by equity companies, and they were being insured by multinational insurance companies. These multinational insurance companies avoid risk like the plague, right? They do not take a risk with their money or their investors' money. Would they be investing many, many millions of dollars in these facilities if we're going to be underwater in a few years? Heck no, absolutely not. You can tell they've taken a look at it. They've taken a risk assessment. They're fine with it, and they should be. It's crazy if you look at things like that. There are just so many of these things that you just shake your head and go, again, like you asked, why are they lying to us about this? Well, for the island nations, I understand that because the prime minister or the president of the Maldives, he's standing there with his hand out looking for money. Climate reparations. My island will be gone in a few years. You have to pay us and give us climate reparations. And so I get, they're grifting. These are climate change grifters that are looking for a handout from us. They may get it, but they shouldn't. People, and again, we look at these island nations. In my first book, the UN listed the most at-risk islands, and the people were going to be, there were, I forget, I think it was 20 million refugees by the year 2020. So I went back and looked at the book, and I looked at the top population in 2010 when they made the first prediction, and I looked at it when I wrote the book. Well, population had exploded on these islands. People weren't fleeing from the islands; they were flocking to these islands. I mean, where would you rather live? Wales, where it's nothing but cold, rainy, and miserable every day of the year almost, or would you like to live in an island paradise like the Maldives? I think I would say the Maldives. And no offense to anybody that's living in Wales, but if you're living in Wales, you know what I'm talking about. And you would love to be going to the Caribbean or some other island. And that's why people are moving I just moved to Florida from the state of Pennsylvania, where it's cool. We don't see the sun from late October until late March, and it's not, it's kind of miserable there for 6 months of the year. And I like warm weather, and most people do, and that's why people are flocking to Texas, to Florida, warm climes.
It's interesting. Like maybe I'll take us a tad off topic and ask about your childhood. How did you grow into the kind of man For me, that's fascinating when so many people go along to get along or will listen to, the presidents or prime ministers or whatever because they're afraid for their job or their money or their whatever is their mortgage they need to pay. And there are some of us, I'll put myself in the same, let's say, rising boat, that will do what they need to do because their heart is telling them. It's more honest to share the truth, to help the world, to pass the good message along. Like you said, we have a good life. If you don't listen to the monsters that be, you'll be happy, you'll be healthy, you'll be warmer, you'll have enough food, etc. How did you become the kind of man, let's say, that is sharing this kind
Well,
of information?
that's a good. I was told that there weren't great expectations for me, I guess. I wanted to prove people wrong. And okay, and I did that. I did that in college and um, I've excelled in a number of, I've got several parts of my life that I've excelled at. First as a geologist, and then uh, uh, it's it's been a great journey for me. Uh, in my current mission, my wife tells me that she goes, "This is your mission." She says, "This is why you were put on earth, is to do this and to share this information." And
Mm,
I think she's right. Um, it's so important to me to spread the information about what's factually correct, and and I'm proud to do that. Uh, and I was in the early days in the United States, they had what was called the Tea Party movement, and I organized a statewide group before there was a Tea Party, and and so it was huge. But we disbanded after, well, I won't go into the details, but I was a founding partner of a large um, shale gas exploration company. That was quite a task, and had some interesting adventures, traveling the world to Algeria, and then I was co-author of the first comprehensive peer-reviewed study on the world's largest natural gas field, which is the Marcellus Shale of the eastern United States.
mm.
And again, I was able to travel the world to talk to people about shale gas exploration and fracking. Uh, I was a keynote speaker at one of the first shale gas conferences in China, also in India, trying to share the technology that's really powering the world and powering America.
Interesting that there is enough, more than enough, it seems, of power, gas, food, land, places to
Well,
go.
let me share. So when we were doing the study on the Marcellus, we looked at the top conventional natural gas fields in the world. And the gas in the Marcellus Shale, just this one field in the United States, the top 10 natural gas conventional fields in the world combined didn't equal what the Marcellus was. That's how big it is.
Really?
Think about that. The
10.
10 largest fields in the world combined don't equal what that was. It's unbelievably huge. But the problem is, there's all this gas. If you know where the Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Ohio, it's in the eastern United States,
Mm.
and then north of that is the New England states,
Hmm.
um, Boston in that area. But we can't get the gas from the Marcellus up there because two states, New York and New Jersey, have banned pipelines
Mm.
because of this uh, stupid idea that natural gas and fossil fuels are horrible. So what they have to do is import their natural gas into Boston from LNG from Spain and Algeria and other countries.
Interesting.
It's because of a little known, it's called the Jones Act, that prohibits gas from tankers from Texas and Louisiana to offload in Boston, because they have to be an American flag tanker. And there aren't any. So they have to go buy the natural gas from other countries.
Isn't that interesting? I mean, I've read somewhere and I've heard, the more rules they make, it's not for our benefit. It's to stop us from having a good life, to get in the way and to prevent, the best of humanity from growing. And you've put another several pieces in that puzzle, even in this, short conversation of things that I thought I knew because I seem to feel that I'm well read and well studied, and yet you've brought up a whole bunch of new facts that I even haven't heard before. And That's
Well,
why I
think
was
about
kind of,
that too.
no,
Go ahead.
no, I'm saying that's why I
Mhm.
was curious as the kind of man you are and, how you got to where you are, because, for me, it's fascinating to meet other people, especially men, because I'm a man that go against the grain and are willing to take a chance to stand up to make a better world.
Maybe it's because I'm a middle child. If you know anything about the middle child syndrome. But if we look at oil, we did some work in the Middle East. I was involved with a startup over there. And the fields over there, the big majors won't look at it unless it's 150 million barrels or more. You can make a lot of money at 100 million barrel fields. And there are all these little, or they're not little, but smaller fields that just haven't been pursued. So all that takes is an increase in oil. They'll become way economic. And instead of $70 a barrel, if it goes to 170, then all of a sudden, all these other fields become economic to develop.
Hmm.
And we're going to see that as we go through time over the next 50, 80, 100 years. There's there are a huge number of reserves out there. And again, there's nothing wrong. In fact, there's a lot right with the use of fossil fuels. We can burn coal cleanly. I'll be visiting in Wyoming, one of the largest coal-fired electricity generation facilities that's using clean coal technology to burn it. And I'm going out there to learn about that, and so I'm excited for that trip.
Well, I've heard even the so-called, green energy, cars and electricity. I mean, nobody seems to consider where the electricity comes from that powers the cars, zero emissions, don't look in this room. The emissions are coming from that room. And even as you say, even the emissions in their way, if it's done properly, is not a bad thing. Uh,
In the United States, the electric vehicle market has just been cratering. The demand is not there. I think a lot of the people that would buy an electric vehicle have, and this push that is really, um, it's not a progressive policy. It's regressive economics. By that I mean it harms the poorest among us the most. Is what these policies will do, because that will drive up what they're trying to do with carbon taxation, all their policy is to drive up energy costs. And again, if you do that, if you drive up energy costs, who does it harm the most? It harms those with fixed incomes and the poorest, because they pay the largest percentage of their income energy costs compared to the others. And it's, for example, electric vehicles. Let's say you're a poor person working in the inner city. What kind of a car do you drive? You're not going to buy a new Tesla. You're not going to buy a new anything. You're going to buy a 10-year-old Toyota Camry
for
or
sure.
whatever it might be. You're going to buy a used, there is no used car market for EVs. There's zero. It's so close, it is zero.
Really?
Um, it's part of the problem is that they're very expensive to maintain. They're more than double the problems with repairs are extremely expensive. And the older the car is for an EV, the closer that battery is to needing replaced. And a battery for most electric vehicles can run in the United States, it's $25,000, $28,000 to replace that battery.
Crazy.
Well, who's going to do that?
Nobody.
Uh, right. So what's going to happen? The car gets junk. What happens to the lithium battery? It disappears somewhere into a landfill. These are poisonous things. And they're so dangerous. Lithium is a very unstable element, and it has a tendency to once in a while just ignite spontaneously, and it's very dangerous. We're only lucky that we haven't had a huge tragedy. We've seen the cargo ships that have caught on fire because of electric vehicles and that have gone down.
Mm.
What happens when an electric vehicle is parked 3 floors underground beneath a business or an apartment complex and catches on fire? Because these things, when they're hot and you can't put them out. Well, you can't, but the recommended way to put out an electric vehicle fire is just let it burn. And that's fine if you're out in a parking lot, it's an open space, let it
Interesting.
burn itself out. Or you have to use tremendous amounts of water on it. That doesn't work very well, not like a regular car fire. At some point, this is going to occur. I hate to, I'm not hoping for it, but it's just the odds tell us it's going to happen. And that could be horrific,
It can be.
the destruction. And so it's, I've talked to people at our apartment complex below me. There are electric cars being charged right now. I don't like it.
No, me neither.
I don't like it.
I've gone on some journeys with some, and it seems, used to be the freedom of getting in a gas-powered car. You could go all day, fill up the car and away you go. With the electric cars, every couple hours someone's looking where they need to stop or you're considering, you know.
Well, they're a lot of fun. I mean, if you've not, I don't know if you've driven a Tesla.
Oh, I've been in it a few
Man,
times. Yeah, yeah. They go.
and they get up and go, but okay, fun is one thing. Safety and reliability and range anxiety.
Range anxiety.
We had a huge cold spell here in the United States recently. Just terrible. It was the Celsius minus 30 Celsius and whatever. And the wind was terrible. And these people couldn't charge their electric cars, particularly Chicago was like a graveyard of electric vehicles at the charging station. And I read an account from the one woman. She said, it took me 5.5 hours to recharge my Tesla. She goes, it usually only takes 45 minutes. I went, what? 45? That's what it takes you? It takes her 45 minutes on a good day. Who's going to do that? I drive my Ford up to the gasoline pump. I can have that thing filled up in about 3 minutes and 20 seconds, and I'm on my way. I don't want to stand around for 45 minutes. I got a lot to do.
Yeah, yeah.
That woman's got 45 minutes to waste every time she wants to recharge. She probably got nothing to do and all day to get there.
Well,
Not me, buddy.
Let me ask you this, Greg. Taking everything into account about your first book and your second book and where you are and where you're going, what would you suggest to our viewers, for their life? I know it's your opinion, but someone sitting here going, I've heard all this bad things. You just shared pretty much the opposite. I understand what you're saying. I understand what I hear on the news. And how would you suggest, people live their lives in a nice, happy community way moving forward?
Well, don't live in fear of a fake climate crisis, number one. Find what you do best and embrace it, and follow your dreams. Don't let people, don't, it's okay to live life I'm not going to say without caution, but if you use too much caution, you'll never get things done. Most entrepreneurs, the first time they start out in businesses, and I've created a few, you're almost forced to do it. You're usually laid off and you go, oh my God, what am I going to do now? And you're forced to, okay, well, let's try this.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And thankfully I have a good wife that I had this crazy idea in 2016 that I had a book in me that was going to be very popular, and she supported me. And she supported me in this last book. We've got about 100,000 of my own money that I put out in the creation of this book. I believed in it. I believe in that it will be a huge #1 bestseller shortly. And because of that, I had 20,000 copies of the books printed up front. And so I monitor my inventories every day. I've got 1,500 here in Arlington. I've got 1,500 at my home in Florida, and the other 16,000 are sitting in a warehouse in Minnesota, and we distribute them to Barnes and Noble, to Amazon, and all the other distributors. And so the book is about ready to take off. And my wife's getting a little bit nervous because we just launched and we've got all this money tied up in it. But I didn't do it to make money at all. I did it to get our message out. As long as we break even, I think I'll be all right. But this is my mission in life, is to do this. And I'm doing this leading the CO2 Coalition. We've had a tremendous response from people just saying, we love what you're doing. We love the message of science that you're giving us. And we just see an outpouring of support from people across across mainly the United States, but from around the world that are supporting our efforts. And because of that, when I joined the CO2 Coalition in late 2020, we had 2 employees. It was me and another person. I had a dream for what we could be and what we could do,
Hmm.
but I didn't have the manpower and woman power to do it. And so we had to build up and donors, foundations, and we now are getting people responding. I've now got 11 employees at the CO2 Coalition that we're doing things like an education initiative that we launched last year. And you can learn about that at co2learningcenter.com, co2learningcenter.com. We've got books that are done, they're comic books, science-based comic books. They're done manga style. And we've got videos that are done anime style that are just the kids love them. And importantly, we have Dr. Sharon Camp, who was an AP science teacher, PhD in chemistry. She does the lesson plans for each one of those. So not only do we have this science-based comic book, we have a lesson plan that goes along with it for charter schools and homeschooling parents.
Hmm.
So all of my grandchildren are homeschooled. And my daughter just loves the lesson plans. So we're doing something to fight the indoctrination of children. We're actually doing something, fight back against the climate lies. And people are responding to it. We've had a great outpouring of support for this. And that's allowed us at the CO2 Coalition to hire the people we need. And we're still not done. We have a lot of things that we've got planned. We haven't done a podcast yet. Maybe I'll follow in your footsteps. It's in the books, but we just haven't had the time. We've just launched a new video campaign. Signed a big contract for videos. That the fellow's helping us out has 15 Emmy Award nominations and 7 Emmy Awards himself. These are high quality videos about the science, about climate change. They're really, really impactful. I think they'll make a difference. So there's a lot that we want to do, and I'm a huge optimist of where we are. I've been saying for some time, we are winning. We are winning bigly. And I'm really, really, really optimistic about what I say. And people are waking up to the climate BS. They're waking up to what they're proposing. It's going to be economically destructive. It's going to hurt them and their families and their wallet. It's going to hurt them economically. They're trying to control every aspect of your life, whether it's how much water comes out of your faucet or your shower head, what kind of washing machine or dryer to use, what kind of car to drive. And it's a control. They're seeking complete control of your life. And I, for one, I'm going to do everything I can to fight it. And that's what we're doing. That's what drives me. I haven't had a day off, and I don't know how long.
Oh, I know how you feel. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I work every. I'm not I'm just saying that's just the way it is because I want to win this damn battle. We're going to win it.
Well,
we're getting closer. I feel it.
Yeah. Well, Greg, I don't do this often, but I'd love to put our services at your service. You want to start some podcasts, you want to share some articles related to your book or excerpts, send them along. We're of the same feeling in getting this out. I've almost quit a few times. My wife supported me as well. My mission has always been to help people grow up happy, healthy, free lives. So I would love to do what I can to help you succeed, through the efforts. We've been doing this for 15 years. Come to newagora.ca. We share tons of information very related to what Greg has suggested, inside, outside, spiritual, energetic, and health. The better you are, the better we are, the better I am, the better the world is. If your neighbor's doing well, you're doing better. And so, I would be delighted. Please show your book, A Very Convenient Warming.
Thank you so much. God bless you.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Greg. I love the work you've done. I appreciate it. Everyone, please like and subscribe, support Greg's book. I will leave the link below. Is your first book still available as well?
Oh, yes. And it's still doing very well.
Okay, so we'll leave the links for both of his books below, and I will get some other links to the CO2 Learning Center. Sounds fantastic. We know a lot of homeschoolers are here and listen to what we're sharing, so I'm delighted to have another resource for you as well. Thank you again, Greg. Hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you. Bye now.
I should start. Freedom first is what I say.